Catherine Tuttle and Ryan Kiefer, who's going to be leading this discussion today. Catherine is a career consultant with the General Alumni Association. Over the past 10 years, Catherine has worked more than 10 now, right? Is it 13?
10. Yeah.
I need to update my bio on you. Catherine has worked one-on-one with MBAs, recent grads, mid-career professionals, executives. She has extensive experience working with resumes, cover letters, and coaching, and is the owner of Forward Thinking Resumes. We are excited to have Catherine working with us to support alumni careers. Ryan Kiefer serves as the Group Interactive Director at Centerline Digital. Ryan is charged with mentoring and managing the interactive development, consulting on projects, and prototyping and researching the future. Recognized for outstanding achievement in web development by Web Marketing Association, Ryan has built and led teams building websites for industries as diverse as real estate, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, insurance, engineering, and architecture. Nonprofit, banking, finance, municipalities, law, hospitality, and tourism. Ryan is a 2000 graduate from the School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Without further ado, I'm going to just pass it over to Catherine, who's going to just do a couple talking points up top about interviewing in general, and then we will open it up to a wider discussion.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. And I see a note from Holly here. I was going to say the same thing. If you guys are on and could just mute yourselves, that would be great. We're getting a lot of background noise. We had a dog barking earlier. So if you could go ahead and mute yourself until you have a question, and then we'd be happy to allow people to use the microphones. That would be great. Okay, looks like most of you are doing that. Thank you so much. That will help. So we're really happy to be here this morning. I'm so thrilled to have Ryan with us as well. We've been on other panels together about this topic, among others, and Ryan has some great insight as a hiring manager, as somebody who has interviewed people, and also as someone who has recently interviewed and taken on a new position. So he's got some great insight. And we chatted yesterday briefly about the plan for today, and Ryan and I both agreed that it's important to just take a moment to acknowledge that there's a lot of uncertainty going on around hiring, economy, the job search, interviewing, whether or not that's going to happen at this point, all of that. And so, that is certainly something that we all have top of mind. And I will say, just from my perspective, and I'm going to let Ryan share his as well. From what I am seeing, there are a number of organizations, including higher education institutions, that are on a hiring freeze. So it's not every organization. Obviously, healthcare is hiring right now. There are going to be some industries that benefit from this pandemic, and some that don't, obviously. What I'm seeing is that organizations and clients that I have who have been in the process already are continuing to move forward. So they are having remote interviews via Zoom, Skype, WebEx. We do not know at this point whether any final offers will be made through the virtual interview process. So again, we're all taking this one day at a time and taking in all the data that we can. I still think it's incredibly important to be prepared. So coming on this WebEx is a great way to do that. And we're happy to answer any questions that you have about interviews that you've had before or interviews going forward. Ryan, do you want to share a little bit about what you're seeing as an employer?
Yeah, I mean, in general, we are seeing down in hiring. Company just went into a hiring freeze. But that being said, kind of to Catherine's point, we just onboarded somebody virtually yesterday. We added a new senior developer to my team, and luckily I had worked with him before, so it wasn't as awkward as it could have been. Basically, he came into our physical office for 10 minutes to pick up a laptop and some paperwork, and then was in Zoom meetings the rest of the day for onboarding. And so it's a interesting time for everybody right now. That being said, since I came back to Centerline just at the end of January, so I've only been there 2 months now. And we're already seeing there are some people that have moved on. Our director of HR is moving on to a bio pharma company for a bigger and better opportunity. So there definitely are still companies hiring. My department in general has seen actually a lot of growth because so many people have had to move, trade shows and conferences and things online. So they're looking for websites and applications and things to do virtually. And, something like we're doing today, having something to give people afterwards. And obviously you can't hand out any kind of tchotchke. So a lot of people are sending out a URL. So there's definitely still some opportunities for people out there.
And as Ryan and I were talking yesterday, this is also a really great opportunity with the flexibility that we have working from home to take advantage of sessions like this and to reach out to former colleagues, reach out to your network. If you are thinking about making a move in the coming months, your network of professional colleagues and friends is going to be incredibly important in this job search process. So we encourage you to think about informational interviewing while you are waiting for that actual interview. But with that, I guess we can head into questions. Jack, do we have any we want to start with?
Yeah, so again, feel free, everyone on the call, to either type your questions in the chat, or if you'd like, you could unmute yourself and ask a question in person. Just to give everyone a minute, we had a couple questions sent in ahead of time. This is a question that I'm sure a lot of people have. Oh, did someone have a question? Okay. How do you answer the interview question, tell me about a weakness of yours?
Yeah, Brian, you want to take that one, or you want me to go?
Either way.
Well, I'll take this one, and then I'll let Ryan jump in with any other thoughts. I think this is one that tends to scare a lot of people. What we're looking at here is basically self-awareness. Employers want to know that you are humble enough to admit any weaknesses that you may have. It kind of shows vulnerability. It shows open and honest communication. What we want to do here is first of all, not pick something that's detrimental to the job, right? So if it requires an extensive amount of presenting and going out in public and representing the organization, clearly we don't want to say my biggest weakness is public speaking, because that would probably eliminate you. What we want to do is think about getting a weakness, but then the key is, what are you doing to address it? So if you have, you are, let's take the public speaking example, nervous about public speaking. Did you join Toastmasters? How did you overcome that shyness to get to the point where you could get in front of people? If it's time management, is it, do you have a solid calendar and to-do system now that you are sure that you're able to accomplish the tasks you need to accomplish? Do you seek feedback if you get stuck? Like sometimes people overanalyze. So you've learned to give yourself a certain amount of time to think about that problem. And then, if you're still stuck, you go to your manager or colleague. So it's really, are you self-aware enough to know that you're not perfect? And then what have you done to address whatever potential weakness there is in your profile?
Yeah, I would just say that we find it as a way, not just self-awareness, but we try not to say no or yes without any elaboration. So we want to see that you're aware and then have a way to to make up for what you think is lacking or your plan to help how you're going to be lacking in a certain area. Not just, hey, I'm not good at public speaking, but here's, I'm not good at public speaking, but here are the things I'm doing to try to improve myself. Or here are ways that I supplement.
We had a comment in the chat from B Steele who says, "Thanks, I'm happy to be on this webinar. I interviewed over video for a job over the last 2 weeks during the pandemic and got a job offer last Wednesday.
Oh, wow,
And
that's great to hear.
yeah, it's a weird time right now, but my job offered me an independent contract for 6 months as a flex opportunity due to uncertainty right now." That's great to hear. Thanks for sharing.
So much for sharing. That's great to hear. And I love an openness to contract work. That's definitely something that is much more common in the workforce and can lead to really great opportunity long term.
It's a safe way too, both for you and for the company, to get an idea if you're a good fit overall, if you're going to be okay doing this every day. So it's actually a pretty low risk way for both parties to say, hey, let's do this long term. And a lot of times those turn into full-time opportunities. So it's great to say yes.
Perfect.
Awesome. Again, encourage people to type questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question. Or actually, as a way, because there are a lot of people in the call, why don't you type into the chat that I have a question, and then I can unmute you when we get a second as a way to virtually raise your hand, I guess. In the meantime, this is a great related question, and I'm sure a question a lot of people are going to be having. What are the best practices for phone and video interviews?
Yeah. Well, Ryan, you've been doing some phone and virtual interviews. You want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, and just a little bit of backstory there. I've been out in the workforce 20 years, and I've been laid off 4 times. So have gone through the interview cycle, both on the hiring side and on the other side. And most recently, it was back in October. Company that I would have been at for the rest of my career if I could have. I got laid off from, and there's some kind of cheesy things that people always say, but they're important. Always dress the part, even on a phone interview. Dress the way you would in a face-to-face interview. There's a confidence that comes with dressing the part. Another one I've heard, which I don't know if it's completely true, but they make sure you brush your teeth, because once you brush your teeth, you're a lot more likely to smile, because you're not showing off any grime or whatever, but and a smile or a frown or all that shows up even on a phone interview. So make sure you're doing that. I know that's kind of minor, but it's a good, nice little piece of polish. Do your homework. If you know who you're interviewing with, stalk them on LinkedIn, get an idea of where you can connect. It's all about people and connections and networking. So any way that you can find a connection to talk. I mean, obviously, most everybody on this call has a tie to UNC, so that's a really good one to look, on LinkedIn, like, oh, your class of 2000, I was at the J school then, or whatever. Other tips for video or phone. I mean, just, give answers, but don't, as I'm going on long here, don't give too long answers. allow them to probe more for more questions and, to follow up.
Another trick that I have to add to all of those points is standing up. When you stand up, it actually, you project more, and it gives you that confidence of standing up straight, allows you to project better. I would say for a video interview, test it beforehand to make sure that there's no glitches, that you can download whatever tool they're using. I would practice with somebody if you can. If it's Zoom, set up a Zoom call with your friend. And you also want to make sure that your background is clean and not one that could be distracting, right? So we want good lighting and a pretty simple background. I remember talking to a hiring manager at Cisco a couple of years back, and he did a lot of interviewing over Zoom, and he said it was so distracting. One time he was interviewing a candidate, and he was sitting in front of a bookshelf with all of these books, and he was like so distracted trying to read the book titles, see what he was reading, that it was hard to pay attention. So really clear, clean background, good lighting, and test the technology, exclamation point there.
And Zoom specifically has a virtual background thing, so you can find a wallpaper that's super simple and clean it up so you're not seeing, the Carolina Hurricanes in U.S. jersey behind me.
Right. Jack, I think we got a question about salary and how.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you answer the question, what is your salary expectation when you do not know the salary band or salary range for a company? I don't want to undersell myself, but I also don't want to price myself out of an opportunity.
Right.
From Rob.
That's a great question. So I get this question a lot. I would say that you're exactly right. The goal is to not undersell. So we want to avoid giving a number before, as long as we can. And we also want to avoid having to disclose your current salary, anything along those lines. That question is now illegal in 15 states, I believe, because it puts women at a significant disadvantage to their male counterparts when they have to disclose a salary, which is unfortunately so often lower than a man in the same role. So my suggestion is to always say, I understand that salary is an important part of the conversation. I'm more than happy to provide that number, but if you could share a range with me, that would be helpful. We want them to give you the numbers that they're working with. That allows you to then verbally, accept that range. You don't have to give a number within that range. All we have to say is, yes, that sounds reasonable to me. It fits with what I was thinking. So, I'm happy to move forward. Ryan, would you agree? Are there any other kind of ways to approach that?
I mean, that's usually the way that I've seen it approached the most successfully. It is nice to have an idea of, early in the process that you're not wasting each other's time. Right. There have been times when, you get all the way through the process and realize that they were looking at a resume from, 15 years ago or something, and with it, that didn't have the same experience or something. I think it's helpful to have a range up front. I would also warn against if you're looking on like Glassdoor, a lot of times they will give a range that the company didn't give. It's estimated based on the title or the zip code or something, and a lot of times those are not accurate. So make sure that conversation is had with the employer rather than relying on a website.
Yeah, there's definitely some great places to get data points like Glassdoor, salary.com. There's a couple others. The other tool that I think is helpful, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, it's NACE. They have a salary calculator online where you can enter in your geography, your years of experience, your degree, a bunch of different data points, and it kind of spits out a range. So again, a data point, but that's an organization that polls employers, some of the employers that partner with universities across the country. So
as a prospective employee, you can actually use that to start the conversation too. Hey, I pulled this up from here. Would you say this is in line with what you're looking for in the position? Mm-hmm. It's an easy and non-confrontational way to ask about it.
Yeah.
We got a question here too. What about sites like PayScale?
Yeah, same thing. It's a data point. I think it's certainly, again, you want to compare data from different sources. I think this is also where the networking and kind of relationship building proactively comes into play. Obviously, you wouldn't ask somebody how much money are you making, but you could ask, as somebody with 5 years of experience coming into a project management role, do you have a sense of what that pay range would be, right? So when you have internal connections, you have a little bit stronger data point there. So you can compare that with PayScale, Salary.com, Glassdoor, and kind of find something that you're comfortable with.
Great. We have a question here from, sorry, I lost it in the chat. 1 second. Jane, who asks, how would you address a question during an interview that you had never thought about? For example, I was once asked about leaders I admire, but had not prepped for that question. Nor was it a conversation topic amongst friends that I could pull from. Basically, I was totally unprepared for the question.
Yeah.
What do you suggest?
Yeah. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is to be authentic up front. You're like, wow, that's a question that I've never had come up before. And it's okay to take a second or two and say, let me think about that for a minute. I mean, even to the point, if you say, oh, that's unique, that's a really good question. I need a second to think about that. Can we go on to something else? And let's go back to that after another question or two. I think that's completely legitimate, and people would appreciate your honesty.
Yeah, I would much rather you do that than start to ramble. I would definitely do what Ryan said. Could I have a minute? If it's really not coming to you, gosh, can we come back to that? That's a great way. If for whatever reason it's just not coming to you, this is a high stress situation. I get it. I think we've all been there where we've gotten a question. We can prepare with all the behavioral, question prep and have examples ready, but oftentimes there is something that we didn't anticipate. If for whatever reason it's not coming to you, what I would suggest is following up in that thank you note. So really, when you end that call, think about it. You've got time, you're not under pressure, follow up, say thank you so much. I enjoyed talking to you. I realized there was that one question that I just couldn't answer. I thought about it. Here's a leader I admire and why. I think if nothing else, that shows some humility. It shows determination, follow up. So I would try that, but try not to beat yourself up when that happens, because we have all been there in an interview where it's just like, darn, I wish I'd thought of that.
I once got asked in an interview what my spirit animal was, and that was like one of the most bizarre interview questions I've got. I think my answer was fine, but you never know. Joey asks, is it more important to focus on being eager and enthusiastic about your fit for the position, or list your detailed accomplishments and skills? I know the obvious answer is probably both. Sorry, I lost the question, but I've tried to do more of the former recently because I get the feeling that some interviews are also looking for culture fit rather than just a reiteration of resume qualifications.
People hire people, right? They don't hire resumes. So it is a delicate balance of both, in my opinion. It is important to show that you can do the job, to have specific examples, not just reiterating the resume, right? The resume should be, here's what I did and here was the result of that action. But the interview allows you to give some context. You can talk about why that project was important to you, or what you learned through that project, or the fact that you took that on your own initiative. Like, there's different ways to illustrate those skills and not just reiterate the resume. But yes, that should also be mixed with showing that you are eager to join the organization. Ways to do that without just saying, hey, I'm really excited about this position, is as you move forward in the interview, I want you to ask really good questions of them. What are the priorities? What are the key skills you're looking for? 30, 60, 90 days. What are the goals? And then you can then be proactive about illustrating that you've thought about how your skills will benefit and projects that you might be able to take on. I understand that a key initiative is XYZ, and that's really exciting to me because I've done that here. It's one of the things I enjoy most in my role, right? So it's certainly they need you to be able to do the job, but they also want you to be eager to do it.
Yeah, everything she said. I mean, the only thing I would add is just that, most jobs, I mean, what you're doing today isn't what you started out doing. You've added skills on as you've gone along. So some eagerness to, that you're accepting of whatever curveball comes at you, in week 2 or week 400 or whatever, just the ability that you're going to be able to roll with the punches and you want to expand. The company wants you to expand too. You don't want to be doing the exact same thing 4 years in. So I think eagerness is huge.
Yeah.
Great. Got a question here from someone who submitted it ahead of time. How do you prepare for all-day interviews with multiple groups?
Yeah. Oh, those are tough. Those are definitely tough. I was thinking about that yesterday, kind of preparing for this, and wrote some notes just to make sure I'm getting this, because it's an important question. So first, I would say, to make this a little bit more, I think a lot of this is just the stress of the unknown. And this is all day. What's that going to be like? I would ask for a schedule for the day, and I would ask for a list of people participating in the interviews, if possible. I think most people will give that to you to say, I'm preparing for our conversation next week. I'd love it if you could send me just a schedule for the day and a list of people, because that allows you to do some prep work. Like Ryan said, look the people up on LinkedIn, look for connections, look for ways to make this more of a conversation and less of a interview. I think throughout the day, it's going to start to feel like one long interview, and that's hard to not have happen. You're going to feel like you're answering the same question over and over. I think it's important to try to maintain stamina at the beginning and kind of resetting after each session. That comes down to, a handshake, looking in the eye, the chit chat from one space to another, like making sure that we're paying attention to all of that and closing the interview well, asking good questions of them. I think you want to give consistent answers, and it's okay to repeat, a certain example multiple times. Again, you're going to start to feel like you're did I tell you this? Did I tell somebody else this? But I would try to vary the emphasis within those answers, so you're highlighting different skill sets in different ways. So like going back to public speaking, I wrote you could tell a story about how you overcame a weakness by working on your public speaking, or you could also highlight your public speaking as an example of you being able to connect with a large group of people in a room and engage people that way. So and then the last thing I would say, and this sounds silly, but have supplies with you. If you're likely going to get water, if you're somebody who typically has caffeine in the middle of the day, bring a 5-hour energy shot or whatever you need. If you if you typically have a snack, after lunch to kind of get you through the late afternoon, put a power bar in your pocket or your purse. You can always kind of sneak into the bathroom and have a bite. We just want you to keep your energy up throughout this process.
Yeah, keep in mind that anybody that's interviewing you has probably gone through the same process. So they're going to be completely open to you saying, hey, can I have a 5-minute break to get something? They're probably going to offer it, but use the restroom, get up and just walk around. But make sure to take advantage of those, because a lot of times people are coming to you. You'll be in the same conference room all day. The best ones are when okay, we're going to take you to the second floor now, and you get to see glimpses of the organization. But sometimes those all day or half day or whatever, you're in the same place. So take every advantage you can to get up, walk around between sessions, get a drink, use the restroom, just to reset. It's amazing, kind of like Catherine was talking about earlier about standing up during a phone interview. That works too in these interviews. Don't stand up in the middle of your interview, but in between, just to reset and get the blood flowing and stuff.
Great. We got a question here from Rob, and was also one of the pre-submitted questions. But what are your suggestions for the time at the end of the interview? The interviewer says, "Do you have any questions for me?" Usually, there's only a limited time, 5 minutes. What are the best questions to ask the interviewer to help enhance your job opportunity? And one of the questions we got submitted ahead of time was about how many questions should you ask in that time period?
Obviously be respectful of the time. If there is just 5 minutes, don't ask something that's going to need, more elaboration than that. The worst thing you can do is not have any questions. To me, that's showing disinterest beyond what you see in the job description, or that you're done. Have questions ready to go. Have perused their website and ask something about something on their culture, about us page, or I've worked with this type of department before. How's your company operate your creative department? Or something that shows that you have some knowledge of the company. And the other one that in my last layoff, I went to a bunch of different events, and one of them was networking with Nate, which was at the time a Friday morning, super early morning networking session. And one of the sessions there made a good point of, and obviously only if you get through the interview and you feel it's a good fit, is to ask for the job and to ask for the person in that interview to be an advocate for you. And it sounds a little unnatural, but find a way that it works for you, and basically say, what can I do? What can I answer to you? Throw it back to them. What can I answer for you to make you an advocate for me? What are things that you want me to work on to take this job next level? How can I improve things? Obviously, do it in a non-confrontational way, but basically ask for the job if you think it's a good fit.
And I think in addition to those points, I agree with everything Ryan just said. I think it's a great time to show that you've done research on the company, as he said, but also the interviewer. So, people like to talk about themselves, and asking questions about the interviewer and their experience builds some rapport. So saying, I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you been with the company for 10 years. What keeps you here? What do you enjoy about the culture? Those types of things, where you're asking about their experience within the organization. And to Ryan's point about asking for the job, I think oftentimes, people are looking to make a transition. So they're trying to change function or change industry. And I always tell people, if you have a good rapport, if you really felt like the conversation's going well, that you can see yourself in the job, to say, ask a question about their experience within the organization, and then just say, I so appreciate the time and your sharing. I understand that I might have a different background than you typically would recruit from, but I'm incredibly excited about this opportunity. I feel like I'm a great fit. If you have any concerns or questions that I didn't answer earlier, that I would like to do that now. That has worked well for people in the past. And I think employers appreciate your being upfront about wanting the job, and also, wanting to prove that you can do the job. It's that eagerness that we talked about earlier.
This may have been answered a little bit in your previous answers, but B. Steele asks, are there smart questions to ask to understand your position in more depth, the company culture or management style?
understand the position or the management
I
style?
think it's more about the fit. So he says during the interview, I assume the company is not only interviewing you, but you are interviewing them to see if it's the best fit. Are there smart questions to ask to understand the position, the culture, and management style?
That's a great question. So what comes to mind, and again, this is an example of us, let me take a minute and think about this. What comes to mind, one of the questions that I really like is, I'd like to hear the 3 key skills that you feel like would make someone successful in this role. So really getting down to like what it is. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff in a job description, and what you actually do day to day can vary. So what are the 3, if you had to pick 3 or 4 key skills that you need for somebody to succeed in this role, what would that be? That kind of cuts through some of the extraneous information. I think the question about how would you describe the culture of the organization? How do you see this role interacting with the rest of the team? Any other thoughts on that?
I think those are good answers.
Yeah. Again, if I can think of others as we go, but I think with fit, again, because it's something that's really hard to put on paper, and it's hard to assess in an interview situation because you are trying to sell them on on yourself at the same time you're trying to evaluate the opportunity. They're doing the same thing. I think the best way to get at culture and whether or not you fit is to talk with people before the interview starts. Again, it gets back to leveraging your network, whether that's a fellow UNC grad, whether that is a friend of a friend. You get more honest feedback about the culture from people who are in the organization when there is not a specific opportunity present than you do when you're in the interview process. If you ask an interviewer, what do you like about the organization, or tell me, why you've stayed, even if they're not happy there, they're going to come up with something, right? So I really think it's important to do your due diligence on the front end. And then from there, that will help you evaluate and ask questions. So I understand, having talked to some people, that communication is incredibly important here. Tell me a little bit more about that. How do you keep people connected when we're not all in the same office, like that kind of thing. Another plug for networking.
Yeah. On the networking front, like Catherine said, in terms of answer when there's not a job there, you should always be networking. And somebody had brought up to me about, you want to be also connecting with people. LinkedIn makes this a lot easier than it used to be. Connect with people with the job titles that you're looking for. So even, and I hadn't thought about this hypothetical, but it happens more than you think. Even if they don't have a position available, we get cold calls from recruiters all the time, both trying to hire you away, but also trying to add to your team. And recruiters can be a huge tool in terms of finding that next position. So if somebody calls me and is looking, hey, are you interested in this position? I'm not, but I just talked to these 2 people who are, and it helps them, expand their network, and it helps you have a new contact and somebody else being an advocate for you. So I know a lot of this is about in the thick of the interview, but you can help yourself a lot of time between interviews by networking and building up the people that are advocates for you and know your skills and your strengths.
That's great. We had a couple of comments come in. Sorry, Catherine, were you saying something?
Oh, no, I just said I completely agree. That's all.
Holly asks, or Holly says, if you have concerns and want to ask deeper questions about the culture dynamics, you can always ask those after you get an offer before accepting, which is a great point. Garth says, know your values, what you need to be successful, and ask related questions to help assess whether they match your values. No salary amount can close that gap.
That's true. I was just on a webinar with the Association of Executive Search Consultants, and they had recruiters on from a number of different industries, recruiting at a very senior level, and they all, when the questions kind of turned to salary, that was kind of their main point, is that salary is one piece of the puzzle, and it's an important piece. But no amount of money is going to make you happy if it's not the right fit. And fit comes down to not just the culture, but are you able to expand the skill set that you're building? Is this an opportunity that allows you to try something new, to flex a different muscle, to is it something you care about? Like, all of these things come into play. And so we need to think about things outside of that salary number. And then obviously there's benefits and stock options and all these other things that can come into play that add to that number.
We got a couple other great questions. Just want to remind people, if they want to put questions, put it in the chat. We got let's say about 15 more minutes. Apologies if we don't get to your question. We have Wendy here who asks, how do you manage through career transitions? How do you manage interviews through career transitions? I recently left an executive position and am now looking at positions that are not senior level. I'm finding employers not keen on considering me because of my years and level of experience. How do you talk about that in an interview?
I mean, you bring it up right, you off the front, you say, look, I recognize that based on my resume, you see I was a, C-suite or whatever. But you talk about the things that that weren't a good fit for you. I like being in the weeds. I like being able to day to day interact with this. And I was too far removed from that way up there. Just be honest and authentic about the things that you didn't like about that position, spin it in a positive light, but talk about, the reason I'm leaving isn't kind of like we were talking about before, all the money in the world, if it's not a good fit or you're not satisfied every day, isn't going to last very long. So I think it's acknowledging this is more in line with what I want to do day to day. This is not, a stopgap until I find the next C-suite. My passions lie in doing this type of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you also need to think about, everything that you are putting in front of the employer. So if you were in the C-suite but no longer want that to be your emphasis, that should not be emphasized on the resume. That should not be the examples you're pulling in the interview or the cover letter, probably a one-page resume instead of a two-page resume. Like, just think about everything. They don't need to know everything you've ever done. They need to know the things that you've done that align with this role and why you want that. So to Ryan's point, this is what drives me. This is what energizes me. It's not the management of large teams. It's doing the project. And that's where I see myself going forward in my career. I think it's just important to think about every interaction as a data point in the employer's mind.
We got a question here from Jackson, who is relocating out west this summer and is wondering if and how we should bring up the possibility of relocation packages as part of any offer we get. Ideally, it's brought up by the organization. But what if it isn't? The moving costs are estimated to be $10K plus.
Yeah. Hi, Jackson. I think we talked before. Good to hear from you. So I would say negotiation happens when both parties want each other, when there is a commitment on both sides for between both sides, right? So the employer wants you and you want the employer. At that point, we can start to negotiate things like sign-on bonuses, moving assistance, salary, all of these things, right? But those are emotional things, and we want them to be on board and really want you there before we start bringing that up.
I think a lot of times too, companies So, I mean, typically in the search to fill a role, you look within your own network first. Who do people who already work here know? When that doesn't work out, you expand it, in the city or the state or whatever. And once it's gotten to a point where you're talking to people out of state, there's usually some openness to helping out on some of that. They've realized they've spent. I mean, we've been looking at Centerline for a position since last May, and we've exhausted everything in North Carolina. So we're looking at other places outside. And so we know that there's going to be some more expenses at flying candidates in, relocation. So a lot of times, if you have any awareness of how long a position has been on there, it can give you some acknowledgement too of how much assistance they're going to be willing and able to give. We would in a heartbeat do some relocation for this position because we've been looking for it so long. We need that role and haven't been able to find it. So, some awareness of the position and how long they've been looking actually helps a lot.
Great point.
Excellent. We have a question here from Jane Young, who asks, so is it somewhat appropriate to randomly connect with people on LinkedIn who are people you want to talk to, even if the connections are third degree or via college, grad school only? I will use this opportunity to plug the Tar Heel Advising Network.
Yeah.
If you are not already on there, a great opportunity to connect with people who are willing to help any other Tar Heels out. And they're, people have signed up for that, so they're expecting people to reach out to them, even if they don't know them. But with that, I will pass it over to Catherine and Ryan.
I was going to say the same thing. So if you're interested in that resource, certainly check it out. It's on the GAA site. You do have to be a member to access it, but an incredible tool. But to the question, yes, that's the whole point of LinkedIn, right? It's to understand and leverage your connections. Yes, there are ways to do that if your only connection is your alma mater. And LinkedIn has ways specifically to search for people based on your undergrad and graduate schools. And we also have a webinar where I actually pull up LinkedIn and kind of walk you through how to do that and how to connect with people that might be third connections, but then members of the GAA group on LinkedIn, right? So I would check that out if you're interested. But yeah, I think it's being thoughtful of how you approach that, right? So people tend to be more open to connecting when there is not a specific opportunity that you are reaching out about. So especially if this is a second or third degree connection, if you have an intermediary, I would go to that person and ask them to make an introduction. It helps with the response rate there. Otherwise, it's, a quick note to say, hey, I'm a fellow Tar Heel. Looking to connect with more folks in the marketing space or in the world of finance. If you're out of state, I think that also helps. Like, hey, I'm a fellow Tar Heel up in New York. You're not bumping into them every day the way you are down here in the Triangle. So, just asking for information, asking for advice. Those are things that people tend to be open to. So I would certainly reach out through LinkedIn or the Advisor Network.
The introductions is huge. And if you don't do that part and you just hit the connect button, make sure you send a message with it. Don't just connect. I might be able to see, okay, I might be connected to this person through, so-and-so, but just sending a message, even it's like, hey, just wanted to connect and compare notes, or it doesn't have to be some huge thing, but any kind of message there makes it, I don't know the number, but 80% more likely that that person is going to connect with you. I mean, put yourself in their shoes if you were getting the introduction or the invite.
Yeah. And to that point, in terms of better response rate on LinkedIn specifically, having a photo and making your profile public so that somebody can, if they don't recognize you, look at you. Profiles with photos are like, I can't remember, 15 times more likely to be viewed, if not more. So we want we want them to be able to kind of easily find the connection point. So if everything is private, I think oftentimes you're going to get a decline there.
All right, we got about 7 more minutes here. We have, so if anyone wants to get a last minute question in at the end of the session, I'll go over just some other resources that we offer Alumni Career Services. We've got a question here from Mary who asks, I have had several seasonal intern positions over many years, mainly because in 2008, I graduated in 2008 during the recession. How do you essentially combat that in an interview and kind of show that you aren't committed to a job or a company, or perception that you might be a job jumper?
And you want to take it, or you want me? I mean, fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, again, authenticity and acknowledgement of, look, I know I've had these different positions. If they're not in your field of study or not what you want out of this position, the best thing to do is be looking at things that you're doing outside of that job to enhance, your learning within the position you're looking for. So, like this, I was doing this just to pay the bills, but in the meantime, at nights I was, working on this website, or I was taking these classes through Udemy or whatever, things to show initiative and things that are related to the job. And fortunately and unfortunately, there is more job switching these days. Back in the day, our parents and grandparents would be at a position for 20 years or, their whole career, retire from the same place they started, started as the secretary and ended up the CEO or whatever. It just doesn't happen like that very much anymore. So I think people are more open to it, but I think it merits an explanation, especially if you're worried about it. Get it out, talk about it up front.
I think showing that initiative to gain the skills and exposure to whatever industry or function you're looking to go into. So as Ryan said, if you want to do social media communications, are you blogging about that at night? If you want to be in the marketing field, join the local American Marketing Association chapter, go to those events, potentially take on a volunteer role or another position. Really need to show that you're taking the steps to gain the skills and knowledge that you need to be successful in those roles. We understand. 08, 09 was a hard time to graduate, right? It really was. And a lot of people ended up in jobs that weren't their ideal situation. It's showing what you've done to overcome that, right? So as Ryan said, he was, for example, laid off 4 times, right? These are things that happen. Like, this is the economy we live in. Companies grow, companies shrink. Startups work, startups don't work. People have gaps for a lot of different reasons. It's really, how are you working to overcome that and keep those skills fresh while you are in the job search process?
A related question here from MA Rocks. How do you address gaps? I've been freelancing, doing part-time work for a while and trying to break back into full-time.
I think that what you're doing is exactly what you should be doing. Find whatever you can, whether it's volunteering within your sector, something at a reduced rate, freelancing, contracting, and all of that. If it's related to what you want to be doing, you're doing the right thing. It's definitely true that it's easier to find your next job when you have a job, but what you're doing in terms of part-time work and freelancing and all that is definitely the way to stay in it and keep it fresh.
And I think too, and Mary Alice, I think we're talking later this afternoon. So I look forward to digging into this with you. But a lot of times this also comes down to sometimes, and especially as women, we tend to do this in an interview, we over-explain. And that can come across as wishy-washy to an employer. It can also put a concern in their mind that probably wouldn't be there if you were just upfront about why whether that's I took a step back from full time to be at home with my kids for a few years. At this point, I am excited and ready to get back in full time. That's all I need to hear. I don't need to know about how many kids you have or the specific family issue that made you, and this is women and men. Everybody at this point has a gap in some period of time. I think we need to learn to not overanalyze that or over explain it, because that doesn't tend to sit well with employers. It's focused on what you bring to the table and why this is the right next step.
Fantastic. I think that will about do it for us today. Can everyone see my PowerPoint up again?
Can we address the one that just came in, Ryan?
Oh, I missed one. Yes, go ahead.
Have a second, because I think this is one we get a lot about. The tell me about yourself question.
Yes, I'm surprised we haven't covered that. That's a great question.
Oh no. So what was the specific? I just saw. Tell me about.
Yeah, Rob asks, do we have time for one more? Yes, we do. At the beginning of the interview, tips on how to address the question, tell me about yourself. I don't want to ramble on about my entire resume history.
Right. Ryan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, your resume, hopefully they've reviewed your resume already. So expand on that. Talk about a lot of companies want to see that you have I know this sounds funny. As the employer, you want to see that there's a work-life balance. We don't want somebody that's going to burn out and all their tunnel vision on what they do. We want to see that you have hobbies and how you spend your time outside of work, and see how it relates and how it can expand. I mean, it's amazing. Like I did a website for the North Carolina Courage, and that has added so many conversations and got to meet different people and all that, and just telling that, and there's some passion behind it, that it's a good way to start the interview and see that you have some spark, and can talk about things outside of coding or outside of project management or whatever you're looking to do.
I think that's a great point. And to me, this is, like Ryan said, you're not just walking them through your resume. They've hopefully read that, or at least have it in front of them. To me, this is more about transitions, what has led from one thing to another, with a positive spin. I chose to take this new role because it allowed me to have more exposure to senior leadership and gain some management experience. And so it's more about the transitions between things, what has led you from one thing to another, and then what drives you outside of work. I think those conversations ultimately can help lead to a more personal conversation, which is again getting to fit. Right. So if you connect over an interest in the Courage or the Hurricanes or UNC basketball or whatever it is, that is a good thing.
Great. Awesome. Great last question. Thank you so much, Rob. Again, just going to really quickly plug the Tar Heel Advising Network, which is a platform for alumni to connect. I believe Ryan's on there, so you can connect with Ryan. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. Are you on there?
I am. Yep.
Awesome. Great. So yeah, it's easy to find alumni who are in your field, or maybe a field you're trying to break into. It does replace, we had a previous Alumni Advising Network. You do have to be a GA member to access the Tar Heel Advising Network. Here's some other resources that we offer. Alumni career resources, again, the network, career coaching. Every GA member gets a free session with Catherine every year. We are doing more networking events that will be, more virtual probably in the months to come. So keep an eye out on those. We have a great little base of career resource articles. And then we have pre-recorded career conversations and webinars. And I will share all of this information. I'm going to send a follow-up email with a little survey about today and just some other great resources that you can access. Want to thank so much Catherine and Ryan, especially for joining us today, and really appreciate all the insight that you have given us on interviews. Understand this is, a hard time for everyone. It affects us all in different ways, but we really appreciate you joining here today. And by being here today, you're taking a good step and showing some initiative in this difficult time. Finally, if you have any questions, feel free. You can reach out to me directly or Alumni Careers. I think that's about it. Any last words, Catherine or Ryan?
No, thank you, Ryan, for joining, and thank you, everybody. And I hope to be talking with some more of you in the coming weeks and months.
Thanks everybody for coming out. Just one other resource that's outside the network. On the Dave Ramsey network, there's a podcast called, and I guess it's a radio show too, but podcast is the way, I listen. There's a Ken Coleman, and it's all he does. Everything's about job searching and finding the intersection between your passion and what you're good at. And his biggest thing is the proximity principle. Surround yourself with the type of people that you want to be working with, both from an industry standpoint, but also in terms of passion and drive and all that. So that's something else I would recommend checking out. You can subscribe for free. I think it's just kencoleman.com. I don't have any affiliation. It's just a resource that I, listen to as it comes through the podcast feed. Really good guy and good information on there. And it's a call-in show. So if you have more questions, that's another place you can, ask questions.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And hope you have a great rest of your Monday.
Thank you.
Or Wednesday. Gosh, my brain. All right.
Who knows?
Yes. Bye-bye,
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.